So eventually the protesters take over like the city hall in Kiev. They take over all these government buildings, and another truce is called, and the protesters back out of these buildings. Police start setting their tents on fire in Independence Square where they're protesting. And so, of course, riots kick up again hardcore. They push further in to the Capitol, all that jazz. And so then the Parliament's like, okay, we're going to put out amendments to reduce the president's power. That's what you guys want. So there was a truce called. It looked like everything was going to get settled down. And then the Speaker of Parliament, is basically Ukraine's John Boehner, said, I'm not going to hear any amendments to reduce the president's power. And then, boom, riots break out again. People getting set on fire. Over 150 people injured. Like almost 30 people died, including police and protesters. And it's just been a hellish situation. They're just trying to get, reasonable governing. That's it. I mean, at one point they passed an anti-protest law, and so of course the Ukrainians were like, screw that, and they protest even harder. And this whole situation is all about freedom. And so you've got, Obama making a statement saying, we support the Ukrainian people, and we think the government of Ukraine needs to be better to the protesters. Let me be clear. We hold the Ukrainian government responsible for what it's doing to its protesters. And we are considering sanctions on that country if they don't treat their people better. Of course, the problem is that those sanctions hurt trade and the market and end up crushing those people's wages. But let's not go there. All of these countries, France, socialist France, jerks, French, whatever, Spain, Belgium, I believe even the UK, they're like, we have got to declare Ukraine has a problem, and we would like to announce sanctions on their country. And of course, all these world leaders are like, something must be done in this cercle bleu. We must do something for the Ukrainians. And of course, nothing gets done, and nobody's going to step in, and nobody's going to do anything except the Ukrainian people. They're still out there busting faces, trying to get their government in line. They're getting it done over there, just getting it done. And it's unfortunate that it's all this violence, but I will say this, and this has been a redeeming factor for me, and it shows the difference between a liberty-minded people and an outlandish government and, fascists. When the Ukrainian protesters are getting these cops who are, hitting them with batons, spraying them with tear gas, water cannons, all this stuff, trying to disperse them, burning down their tents, and just generally being thugs. I mean, they're doing it on orders, so, they're just doing their job. But they're doing it to the people of their country. They should be turning around and marching into the government with them. But, job. The Ukrainian protesters, after they beat the snot out of a cop that's been, beating people over the head with a baton, after, these cops have sprayed tear gas on him, they'll pull him out of the, phalanx, the line of shields, and they'll beat the tar out of this cop. And then the protesters will protect that cop after he's been beaten for what he did to the protesters. And it's the craziest thing, because you see these videos, and I love it, of these cops injured on the ground, and the protesters protecting them. They say, enough. This guy's no longer hurting anybody. And so they pull him aside, and they take him to medical tents or a hospital in the area to get treated. So they make their point, they stop the aggression against him, and then they take the guy to get treated. What does it say about the Ukrainian people? I think it says something fantastic. I think it's great that they understand that even though that police officer may have hit them in the head with a baton, thrown rocks at them, sprayed them down with pepper spray, tear gas, canisters thrown at them, battered them with shields, even though they're standing against reforming a government for liberty, the people of Ukraine are preventing these officers from being killed. They stop them from using force, and then they take them to the hospital to get treated. I think that's profound. And seeing the video of that is really just empowering. I mean, they're not being, violent killers. I mean, it would be so easy for them to just kill each other, to just wage war on their own government, and then the military would get involved. But they're not doing that. If one of the cops gets baton happy and starts beating the snot out of a protester, the people will gang up on him, beat him up, and then protect him from any further injury once he's stopped and he's saying, okay, enough. I think that's great. I mean, it's horrible that it's coming to violence, but I'm glad that these protesters are not killing anybody. I'm glad that they are only neutralizing the people using force against them. It's not, Gandhi hunger strikes, peaceful, but I gotta say, if somebody was hosing me down with pepper spray, I'd be pretty inclined to beat the tar out of them myself. So there's that. Now, in Venezuela, it's the same sort of scenario going on. In Venezuela, you've got the socialist regime that's taken over after Hugo Chavez died, democratically elected by their account. I firmly believe that there is corruption in that system and that there's no way that government was elected democratically in free elections. I don't believe it for a second. I mean, it's possible, but I don't believe it. I think that the liberty protesters have higher numbers. I mean, I could be wrong, but seeing these people march and seeing these people riot for basic things like security, because crime is rampant in that country right now. They're protesting for security. They're protesting for a First Amendment. They want the right to speak freely, to criticize their government and their leaders. They don't have that right now. And they're protesting shortages of goods because they can't get food or toilet paper or shampoo. They can't get basic things that we take for granted here in America because of their government. And so these protesters they're in the streets yelling and fighting about all these things. It's not violent like Ukraine. But they're standing up for their rights. They're standing up for their liberty. I mean, it's a fantastic thing they're doing there. They're showing us what you have to do to beat these socialist-leaning people, these communist-leaning people. They're showing the world what you have to do when your government gets out of hand. Get out in the streets, grab a sign, and start shouting at somebody. That's how you get attention. You can't sign an online petition. You can't sit on your couch and click like on Facebook, although I really hope you will like my page. You got to get out there and do something. You do it from the ballot, but more importantly, you get involved in the campaigns for people who will actually make a difference. And you get out there and you picket and you shout at the government when it's messing up. You get out there and you educate people who don't understand. I wish somebody would hand Bill O'Reilly a Milton Friedman's Best Hits album. I can point him to a few YouTube links myself. But it's just fantastic that these people are fighting for their liberty. And here recently, the leader of the opposition, the leader of the protesters in Venezuela, actually, he turned himself in on Tuesday to the government because they charged him with conspiracy, murder, and all this other nonsense. They charged him with conspiring with the United States to destabilize the country. And it's nonsense. And the guy turned himself in willingly, and he said, I'm going to hand myself over to this corrupt system, and I'm going to stand trial because I didn't do anything wrong. And I hope to God they don't do anything to him in that crazy country. They'll probably execute him because they're socialists. But I hope not. He was due in court today, and I never heard anything about it afterwards. I'm sure it'll be in the news tomorrow. Somewhere. I'll make sure it's in the news. And I'll post it if I can find it. But it's a fantastic fantastic thing to be fighting your government for your rights. And it's something we take for granted here in this country. We complacently sit there and enjoy the hell out of some Netflix. And I'm right there with you. But we're not getting involved. I mean, we've got midterms coming up. We've got all these big elections happening, and people are still riding their couches. And they're going to vote based on what name they recognize in some of these elections. And it's a horrible thing. And what's worse is you got people like O'Reilly spouting off about minimum wage, and so all these people are like, well, I'm for workers, so I'm going to do what O'Reilly said and support minimum wage laws. When they should be listening to Milton Friedman that shows that hurts workers. It all comes down to what you're doing. It all comes down to getting out there and getting it done. Now, I can only speak for Texas because I'm in Texas and I only keep up with local Texas politics. I'm not real big on the state elections in the other states. There's not enough time in the day. So you got to sleep sometime. But in Texas, you've got, the Liberty candidates lucky to pull 3%. I'm not saying the Libertarian Party is the way to go necessarily. It's got its flaws, Lord knows. And there's so many anarchists and leftist libertarians who are socialists trying to invade the movement, basically. They want communes, and they're trying to say, well, Marx had it right in some places. So there are people in that movement that should, scare you away from it, and I understand. But you got Tea Party people who would legitimately cut budgets, who would stand by the Constitution and fight tooth and nail to make sure it happens, and they're only pulling like 5% or 8%, whereas you've got these big-name people with lots of money pulling 40-something%. All these people talk about fighting the establishment, but you don't see them going door to door for the candidates that would do that for them. You don't see them making phone calls for that candidate. You don't see them going out and educating people on the issues. How many of you talk to your friends and neighbors and coworkers about liberty? How many of you go to work and say, I wish I could trust this politician to look out for my freedom, but they're not so good at doing that, but this person is, and let me tell you why. Very few people do that. It's like they say, if you want to make friends, don't talk about religion and politics. Look, you got to talk about politics. You can keep Jesus to yourself, and you can keep your Quran close. I know I got a few Muslim listeners, and I think there's a Buddhist in there too. Don't talk religion. That's fine. You don't want to talk religion. That's a social thing. That's all you. It doesn't affect me. But let me tell you something. Politics, that affects me. It affects you. It affects everybody. I don't care how much you dislike politics. I don't care how much your friends hate it. I don't care if they've never watched news before in their life or they just can't stand it and there's so much bickering and I don't understand and all these issues and there's just so much to understand. I don't know. I just really want to watch MTV. Yeah. Those people, you just got to be really simple when you reach out to them. My favorite conversation reaching out to a low information voter was she was an avid watcher of Jersey Shore. Now I know why am I friends with this person? I get it. But I used analogies from the show and explained liberty to her that way. Like, what would you do if the government told you how much gym tan and laundry you could do? Okay? Like, no, you can't do laundry. Doesn't matter how many dirty clothes you got. You can only wash one pair of shorts a day. You can only wash a t-shirt at t-shirt time. Yeah. T-shirt time. All that crap. And so I explained it using those issues. And that's what you got to do. You can't just say, can I tell you about my friend Greg Abbott? Or can I tell you the good word about Kathy Glass? Or have you let Ron Paul into your life? Those things don't work. There's a reason people slam the doors and hang up phones on telemarketers and door-to-door salesmen, Because you can't do that.